All right, welcome into Pod to Win the Game. I am Charles Robinson here with the full crew today. Jori Epstein, Charles McDonald. We were all together at the Jets practice facility. We did the entire Yahoo NFL crew at a Jets practice. It was riveting. It was amazing. You guys both bailed on me. I wanted to get together and have a meal. No. Jori had to work. Charles had to bounce.
I was gonna say, I think I was still there when you left.
No, I had to go get a haircut, which is, I'm sorry, it's a big deal.
It's a priority.
Well, let's see it. Take the hat off.
It looks good, you know?
Okay,
I got my little part back.
But yeah, lots of shenanigans when you get all three of us at the same preseason camp.
It was enjoyable, though. I liked seeing you guys. I wish we got to see each other on the road a little more often. And it was actually at a decent team, a decent camp, a camp with expectations. We'll see if we all end up on Hard Knocks this week. I highly doubt it. Maybe Charles, though. Charles was enjoying the music. C-Mac on the sidelines. I was standing there stoically trying to appear as if I was doing my job. This is episode 400, by the way, of the podcast. 400.
Wow.
Charles has listened to 3 of those, of the 400.
You think I've listened to 3? Wow. That many,
he's like 3 minutes. I've listened to 3 minutes of this podcast.
Well, in fairness, I don't listen to like any sports podcast. So, you know.
Fair enough.
But
Charles,
you think that our listeners should continue.
Yes, our listeners should continue to listen to all of our great podcasts that we have here at Yahoo Sports.
Yes, there we go. There's the plug.
We got there.
Let's talk about where we've been over the last week. So I obviously was at Jets. We were all at Jets. I went through Philly as well. Pittsburgh. I think I talked about Pittsburgh though on the last podcast. So really Philly and the Jets. Jori and Charles. Jori obviously also at the Jets. Anywhere else in the last week?
Yes, I was at Jets a couple days last week, and then I'll head to Miami tonight. So I'll get Dolphins this week. So.
Yeah, I was at Giants before I went to Jets practice last week. And I might head back out to Jets this week. Who knows? We'll see. You know, it's funny. Even though we live in New York City, the Jets Giants trip can be, especially a Jets trip, can be a little bit much some days. You know, ready to watch some games that count. I would say I'm kind of getting to the point where I've watched almost every preseason game, at least through like the first 3 quarters. And, you know, I'm starting to say that the bad football is weighing on me a little bit. I need to watch some real stuff.
You guys should just picture like C-Mac and I were like carpooling to Jets, and it was awesome. We each subwayed to Penn Station in New York and then took New Jersey Transit together. We even were like co-working on the train and then Ubering to the shuttle because it's a 4-step process to get to Jets camp. But yeah, we had a blast.
No, it was a good week. And I'll say this, there was a lot less bullying this time than the last time I was making daily commutes to Jets practice. So, yay. I thought we had a great time, Jori.
I'm not a bully. That's awesome.
Well, it's good that you can visit a safe space now, and it's Jets practice, unlike past iterations of that experience. I'm with you though. Preseason football has been first quarter. You get some starters, some not start. You know, it's just. I would love if I could just count on a team rolling out their entire starting lineup, both offensively and defensively. Even if it's, hey, tune into the first 8 minutes of the first quarter or whatever. But we're still getting pretty much mixed lineups. Looking forward to just let's get the show on the roads. August 21 today. So we're within sight, couple weeks away. The Washington Commanders, though, a little bit of news. We'll roll through some news here. Named Sam Howell as their starting quarterback. Not a surprise at all here. I will say this. I've watched Sam a little bit in the preseason. I've been pleasantly surprised at some of the things that I've seen. He looks really comfortable in that role. Obviously, he got the starting nod down the stretch last year for Washington. I'm curious if this is going to be the Drew Lock experience in Denver, where we're like, oh, you know, looks like he's got something. And then as the window widens and it plays out, we realize there was a reason why this was a player that fell in the draft. Howell obviously fell much further than Drew Lock ultimately did. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on how this affects Washington and realistically what do the Commanders need to do this season for it to be successful? I mean, we can't just look at ownership change and be like, hey, it's it. We're good. We're done with 2023. They still have to show some progress on the field, I think, to get this moving in the right direction.
Okay, my first thought when they named him the starter was, what the hell is going on here? Because none of the timelines are matching up here. Because I thought when they signed Jacoby Brissett, it made a lot of sense. Because just based on, if we just look at the 11 weeks that Jacoby Brissett played for the Cleveland Browns, I mean, he was a borderline like top 10 quarterback, at least production wise. And then the offense kind of fell off a cliff when Deshaun Watson came to the lineup. I thought that made the perfect sense for a head coach who was probably on the hot seat with the new ownership. And you have Eric Bieniemy come over to, kind of pump some life back into his career and hopefully get a look at, a head coaching spot again after the offseason or after the season's over, excuse me. I don't understand where playing like a guy who's a 5th round rookie last year really plays into that. Because if I was Ron Rivera and I'm trying to save my job, I would play the guy who already played at like a high level last year. And I'm looking at the weapons we have and the offensive coordinator we have. Maybe we can actually have some success. I think that Sam Howell, like as far as 5th round quarterbacks go, like he's kind of an intriguing developmental option, but it doesn't really seem like it's a spot that will serve him outside of just getting reps. Because, if he sucks and Rivera gets fired, like he's not going to be the starting quarterback next year unless he, absolutely blows out the water. So I was just a little bit confused at them opting for this young quarterback when they have so much on the line and they have a guy who played well last year, albeit in a different circumstance.
Yeah, it's definitely a high risk, semi-decent reward decision because when you go to the Colts and they're starting Anthony Richardson, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this is your guy. You're committing to him. He's not ready yet, most likely. I mean, he might prove us wrong, but you want him to get the snaps to get closer to ready. Sam Howell seems to be in a different space than Anthony Richardson is in that regard, and yet they're being handled similarly where the guy they want to see is being prioritized for the starting role over the guy who can most likely win a game week 1 right now. And I think not only is it Ron Rivera's job, I mean, I'm not saying that they would get rid of Eric Bieniemy necessarily after 1 year, but he's trying to show he could be the play caller. He could be this guy who really takes the offense by himself without Andy Reid. And look at the quarterback that he's got to work with. And I think it's a tricky situation for a lot of people in the building. I do disagree, though, C-Rob, with what you said at the beginning, which is their season will be more of a success than last year, pretty much regardless. They shouldn't stop there, but yeah, with new ownership, it's already a really big deal. And I do think that new ownership is going to be like, hey, like we need time. We have a lot of years of rot to get out of here.
Yeah, see, I don't agree. I think if they go 4-13, the honeymoon ends quickly. I don't think fans in Washington are going to sit there and go, oh, we're 4-13, but geez, Dan Snyder's not here. No, they're going to go, this is the same deal. We don't have the owner anymore, but we still have the same record. We're still a poor team. I'm not saying they'll be happy now,
but don't you think that the ownership can easily be like, we haven't picked our coach yet, we haven't picked our GM yet, we haven't picked our quarterback yet?
It would be the first time in history that fans have chosen not to be fickle. Come on. We're all on social media. It doesn't take a microcosm of one game going poorly turns fans in the wrong direction. I think an entire season.
Well, they're already in that direction though. So they're not turning. It's when are they coming back?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're giving too much credit to fans in Washington just being like, oh, we have a new owner now and everything's fine. I mean, okay, the Raiders moved to Vegas. It didn't take long for people to get pissy about whether there was success or not on the field. I bought into it initially that, okay, well, they got Dan out of there. So really, no matter what, this is a successful season. I don't think fans really buy that. Okay. Like the Harris Group is old news now. Okay. It's late August. That happened. It's over. We're not going to keep talking about that over and over again. Now they're going to say, what's next? And frankly, could Jacoby Brissett go out there and be an adequate quarterback? Yeah, I think he could. He's going to turn 31 in December. Sam Howell's 22. He's going to turn 23 next month. I think fans aren't going to sit there and go, well, okay, Brissett makes sense if we're in a window now where we're a playoff team or we have to maximize veterans. That's not what Washington is. They're going to lean into young a young quarterback to see what he's got. And I think the reason why that's important is if he doesn't have it, they have to figure out where the hell they're going with quarterback. They're not going to Jacoby Brissett. No franchises are going to Jacoby Brissett. Okay? Great.
They should. They should think about it after how he played last year, though.
I mean, maybe, yeah, absolutely. Maybe they should, but I mean, not at 31. No one's going to look at Jacoby Brissett and say, that's our plan now moving forward at the quarterback position, unless we have the rest of a roster built out. Cleveland didn't have the rest of the roster built out. You said statistically he was good, but there was the W's didn't go where they needed to go. Okay.
They had 140-pound defensive ends. That's why.
Okay, but again, what are we talking about here? Do you think you think Jacoby Brissett walks in there and all of a sudden Washington turns into what? Is it more than a one and done playoff team? Is it a win?
No, but that might save my job if I'm Ron Rivera.
Sarah, I think you make a good point in terms of distinguishing between a more successful year than last year, which I do believe that will happen unless something wild off the field happens, versus the fans feeling like their success and being happy. Those are two different things. Since we're talking about Sam Howell and that they have to at least try, I mean, what percentage likelihood would you guys put it that Sam Howell proves he should be the starter for the next 3 to 5 plus years by the end of the season or by the middle of the season? I mean, do you think he's going to prove it?
No. I mean, he was a 5th-round pick. I don't think his preseason has been impressive. I think Jacoby's been better in the preseason. I just flat out think they're starting the worst quarterback at a time when they're all going to all at risk of getting fired, and that makes no sense to me.
I don't know. Let's give him some real run. Again, I didn't think Brock Purdy would be a long-term answer at quarterback in San Francisco. Then he did what he did last season. He got hurt, and then I went through and I saw the backup options, and I'm like, yeah, he's a long-term answer because the backup options suck. They're not good players right now. Could Trey Lance get better? Yeah, he could. Could, Sam Darnold turn around? Yeah, maybe. But right now, neither player is a starting caliber quarterback. And again, I do think age matters. I do think the team surrounding the quarterback position matters. And Jacoby Brissett is not a long-term piece for Washington. Sam Howell
at 31? Might be. At 31, it's too old for a quarterback?
Okay. No, come on. What? C-Mac, what is Jacoby Brissett? He's 31. What has he done?
Watch the games,
What
dude.
has he done over the length of his career? How many franchises has he been through at this point? You think nobody looked at him and said, hey, you know what? Especially Indianapolis. When Indianapolis wagered what they wagered on him and instead went with what they went with, a bunch of bad options after him. I mean, he's been through multiple franchises now. No one's looked at him and said, hey, that's our long-term starter here. You can say Cleveland's because they paid Deshaun. I get all that. I don't look at him and go, yeah, that's the guy that I'm going to expect will hold up for, I don't know, if I want to resolve the quarterback position, I want a 5-year starter, 7-year starter, 10-year starter if it's an elite player. Okay, so Jacoby Brissett's your 5-year starter in Washington. What have you accomplished that's any different?
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying based on how he played last year, which was on the par with a top 10 quarterback, it's worth seeing.
I don't
what
agree
he can
with
do
that,
again.
by the way, but go ahead. That's fine.
Because I don't know. I watched the games. I looked at the stats. I watched the throws he made. I thought that based on what he did last year, he should get a chance to start, especially over Sam Howell. It's Sam Howell.
Yeah, he looked the best of Cleveland quarterbacks last year.
And he looks the best of the Commanders quarterbacks right now.
Sometimes looking the best gets you a job.
I guess if you just are thinking of 2023, if that's your advantage, if you're just like, hey, we got to do what we got to do in 2023. We're going to roll Jacoby Brissett out there. Maybe we go 8-9. What have we really accomplished? We missed the playoffs.
Roll over and die.
We missed the playoffs. We got a draft pick in a good quarterback draft. Right? Like, I guess I'm approaching this you're approaching it from Ron Rivera's perspective. To me, it's ownership or general manager down. I'm sitting there going, what is the future? The future here, I'm not looking at 2028 and going, I'm going to be really psyched for 36-year-old Jacoby Brissett starting for us and us really putting it all together in 2028. Maybe Sam Howell doesn't have it. This isn't a Sam Howell argument. It is a future argument. If you're sitting there and you're going, Jacoby Brissett's our future, okay, I'm sorry. And I hate to be using the language I am this morning, but I'm surprised that we're in an argument about whether or not Jacoby Brissett is the right decision here. The right decision here is making a plan for the future. I don't think that's Jacoby. Yeah,
I don't think it's either of them. I just don't respect the idea that you would bench someone who played well last year for someone who's barely played at all.
Okay, fair enough.
Think that makes any
if it's
sense.
not either of them, then you have to start focusing on what is the answer. Well, maybe the answer is I don't want one of these guys that's going to get picked in the top 5 next year. Okay, and
so do y'all
I don't think
it's
you're any better positioned
that Sam Howell is the guy?
I mean, maybe he might be
40%.
He might. I mean, is there a chance he might be? Yes, there's a chance he might.
Right.
Be.
So I'm saying if you had to put a percentage on it, are you putting 20? Or are you putting 40?
I would put 0.
Nobody cares about my percentages.
I would put 0 because I feel like when I'm watching him, it's like someone cloned Baker Mayfield, which is like, okay, we're here, but we can do better. We can do a lot better. It's like physically, it's not a high ceiling. You got a low floor because the offense he played in at UNC doesn't have a great track record for transferring over to the NFL. Like it's a lot of the Baylor stuff that you see when Phil Longo was running it. You owe it to the rest of your team just to start someone who can play. But the new ownership, they don't care about that. Why would they? If I was the new ownership, I wouldn't give a about that either because I would be trying to get my hands on like Caleb Williams. But I don't know. To me, it's frustrating to just watch a quarterback who played well get passed up for someone and who is still playing well, like in the current offense that they're both learning at the same time, get passed up for someone who has no track record. And then it's just bizarre to me when you factor in how everyone is about to get fired too. It makes no sense to me.
I don't think there's
unless it's an ownership decision, but from a coaching decision.
The league has conspired against Jacoby Brissett. He's had opportunities.
And his last one was good.
He's going into 31. Okay, he's not going into 24. He's not going into 27. He's had multiple opportunities at different stops to make a mark and stay. The entire opportunity was Indianapolis. That was it. That was his chance. Like they wanted him to be the starter. Did not happen. Okay. And to me, he played solidly in Cleveland. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, but he played solidly in Cleveland. Frankly, now I hope he gets starts. I look forward to this. I really do. I would love to bring this back onto the podcast down the line and we can figure out whether or not Jacoby Brissett is more than a stopgap quarterback. I mean, there's nothing against him. I mean, guy's going to end up having minimum, I would think, a 15-year career. But I don't think he's the future of that franchise. And maybe Sam Howell isn't either. But that is what the priority is right now, figuring out who is not the future. It's not Jacoby Brissett. It might not be Sam Howell. Probably not Sam Howell. We'll see. And then aiming, I think, for what the resolution is next offseason. I like it. Look at that. Spirited Washington talk to kick it off.
About football, no less.
Josh Jacobs is going to end his holdout. He's going to play week 1 versus Denver. That's something that really is happening now as we speak. We're on the podcast. This is not a surprise at all, right? I mean, I think we all agreed previously that you're not going to leave tag money on the table. If you're a running back at this stage, you're going to end up reporting ultimately to the Raiders. You minimized your potential chance at injury in the preseason. Now you got to get yourself ready, to play week 1 and not suffer some kind of soft tissue injury or whatnot. But this does not surprise me at all that Jacobs ultimately is going to report. And I think the Raiders are happy about it. I do think the Raiders, still having passed through there, believe there is a chance to work something out long-term with Josh Jacobs. I don't know if that will ultimately happen or not, but it's not nearly as contentious. Not that everybody's happy, but it's not nearly as contentious in Las Vegas as it is in Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor.
Hey, what else was he going to do here? It's the Saquon conundrum.
Yeah, that's it now.
I feel like maybe sometimes more casual fans don't realize that, like, once the franchise tag deadline passes and you don't have a deal, for a long-term deal, that's kind of it. So for Josh Jacobs, the question always is, once you pass that point for these running backs, well, what's next? Maybe you get lucky and you get a slightly like a 2% amended deal like Saquon did. But I think the realistic point is where Jacobs ended, saying, dude, I'm not going to burn $600,000 of potential income a week.
It's crazy.
And that's it. That's it. That's a lot of money. It adds up quick.
We were in Jets camp. I think we all were there looking at different things. Obviously, Dalvin Cook talked while we were there. Jori ended up writing about that. CMAC, you're kind of holding out for the Mekhi Becton. At some point, Becton's going to talk and reveal all his secrets.
To C-Mac specifically when he's ready.
Right.
Yes, to C-Mac specifically when he's ready to talk. I do want to talk about Cook first, though. His podium appearance. It's not that he wasn't excited, but it just kind of, I felt like it was like a vet who had been there for a long time came to the podium to talk to us about, Jets related stuff. It just lacked the energy that I would have expected given the run up to his signing. Maybe I'm reading too much into one day, he's gonna have a baby and he was headed out to handle that life business, but I don't know. It wasn't as exciting as I thought. Once they signed him, I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty exciting when they roll him out and we get the chance to talk to him, and kind of felt, I don't know.
Deflated, I'm with you, C-Rob. I'm with you. Is this how we're just going to react to all running back signings now? Like, is that a Dalvin thing? Because you would think that adding someone, even if I don't think he's, peak Dalvin, but he's better than their backups, I don't know. It was kind of weird. It's just like, any other signing.
It's interesting I'll say that because I'm not sure that the lack of energy was on the question front. I think on the question front, people were asking like, hey, did you come here because you think you could win it all? Did you come here for Aaron Rodgers? Yeah. And it was more that for Dalvin and for these running backs, they feel like, yes, they might have found homes, but they don't feel like they got what they were worth, or they don't feel like they got it in the timeline that they wish that they wanted. I mean, he was even talking about this group chat that the running backs have started. He thinks Derrick Henry started it. And we had heard a little bit about it Zoom at the beginning of training camps, which was Austin Eckler organized, I believe, who has a Yahoo podcast, if y'all don't listen. And which we know C-Mac doesn't.
I do listen
to sports podcast. It's a sports podcast. Yeah, I hope you don't. But anyway, so he was talking about this group chat, and I'm like, well, what's going on in the group chat? How many running backs are in there? And he's like, I think pretty much all the starters are in it. And he goes, because at some point, it just kind of affects your mentals if you go to work every day feeling like you're not getting what you're worth. And so we just need to check on each other. And it was sort of like not what you were expecting. And so I think on one hand, he's excited for the opportunity. It's also weird, kind of what we're talking about with these quarterbacks. Dalvin Cook is coming in, and I don't know, is he RB1? Is he RB2? He's not 3, and he's either one. He could be 1A, 1B, and 2 at various points in the season, but you still have Bryce Hall, who was fantastic before he got hurt last year. He's integrating into practice, into team drills now. So it's unclear, 1, what his role will be, 2, how much of his incentives he'll get and if he feels like they're worth it. And oh, by the way, he has some off-field issues that C-Mac asked him about. There's no the Jets say they don't expect him to get suspended, but there are a few things that sort of keep it from being peak exciting, even though he did say, like, if you don't want to come play with Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what you want out of football.
I also wonder if this is just like excitement overload. You only have so much emotions to spill. You got the Aaron Rodgers deal. You got the Quinnen Williams contract extension. This is low class compared to those highs,
It actually is. Yeah. No, I mean, that's actually a pretty good point. I mean, it's on the scale of things that have happened in that organization, this offseason, it is a little further down the list than maybe you might expect. But I do think maybe that emotion of running backs just kind of being irritated with what's going on right now with them, might have played into it a little bit. I thought it was interesting when I had a chance to talk to somebody in Miami and somebody in that franchise, and they were like, we didn't make an offer that like once they saw that what the Jets were ultimately going to pay him, they were like, yeah, we were never really going to be in that conversation. Like we didn't go to the table with that kind of money to, put ourselves in a situation to actually land him. I think this person thought once they saw the actual money that he landed with the Jets. So it was sort of a one-team affair. Jets maybe, bidding against themselves a little bit, but not really bidding against themselves. I think they just were trying to value what they thought was another piece that would help the offense exponentially. I would think that he and Bryce Hall, once Bryce is as healthy as he can be, it'll be a split rotation between those two guys. I don't know, like Zeke, Tony Pollard, where you're going to have basically two talented players and they'll probably lean into whoever has the hot hand and then, rotate that person out for a blow or situationally, whatever it is. But when you asked him about who all was on the Zoom call and he said pretty much everybody, I was like, wow, like that's a lot of like pissed off
group
people.
Chat, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of names in there.
There's a lot of pissed off people.
What about this spin zone for why he wasn't super excited? He had just come from watching team practice. He didn't contribute or he didn't participate, but he watched it. Maybe he saw the Jets offensive line work and it was like, ooh, what am I running behind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the gist from what I sort of got inside the organization about the offensive line, they're still sorting things out. But especially as it pertains to Becton, they're like in the midst of this like ramp up process with him. And I think they almost feel like if they get something out of him this year, hey, it's like a pleasant surprise like that. It's wild that that's where we're at now, where it's like if he contributes something positively, that just ends up being sort of this gravy that they're not even really expecting now at this point. They're hopeful for it. They want to be supportive, but at the same time, they're just like, we kind of been down this road before. Like, how often are we going to buy into?
Shoot, they shouldn't have backed themselves into a corner. They got Billy Turner and Max Mitchell starting at tackles now. You and me could look. Yo, I don't know how much you watched that last game, but they put Max Mitchell at left tackle and Billy at right. Dude, it's
they like. Let me put it this way: they're excited about their interior line. They're not.
Dude, I think their best player is hurt right now. So
yeah,
ABT. Well, to me,
Elijah.
Here's how I would look at the Jets' offensive line situation. There's so much riding on this year. You just got to start taking home run swings. Like, I know that maybe like off the game that they just played, Becton is clearly their best offensive tackle. Like, it's just not, they're not even all in the same ballpark as far as talent's concerned. So like, if he's able to actually like stay on the field, they just got to rip that Band-Aid off.
Oh, they'll start him. Oh yeah. I mean, if he's healthy, like if he
can
play an entire game. Yeah.
Dude, he had like 5 pancakes. It was crazy.
There's no question. If he is healthy and he's on the field, they still have the confidence in him, especially the talent. Like the general manager who took him in the first round is still there. It doesn't just get lost, but I think it's more sort of that frustration of, okay, here we are again, feeling like we're getting to a point where he can contribute and be a part of the team. And, wow, if he really is 100% healthy and touches on the talent that, he brings to the table. What we saw really as a rookie when he looked fantastic. That's great, but I don't want to say you don't want to count on him, but that's kind of what that feeling is like,
But
like you can't.
They should have got better insurance to tackle them.
There's no argument there. I think when we're all together, one of the points that I kind of made, it's a fundamental flaw.
Yeah.
Right. It's a fundamental flaw for that team. Like there's all these things to like about defense is awesome. Front end of the defense is sick. There's leadership on both sides of the ball. You kind of have like a nastiness that each leader brings, whether it's Rodgers or Quinnen Williams. And then you just have this one unit that could undercut so much progress offensively,
right.
For that team. And they're not alone. I think there's a number of teams that I saw going through camp where you're just like, yeah, a lot of things I like here, but that offensive line is not in a good spot. And that could ultimately end up destroying a lot of the progress or the pieces or everything you bring to the table. That's just kind of where they're at.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Is it just because of, I know that there are definitely coaches around the league who say like, we can't do enough in the offseason during OTAs, during training camp to develop the offensive linemen in the way that we need. But you think it's more of a pipeline problem?
I think it's two-tiered. And I might as well just do it now. My biggest takeaway, I think my biggest like fundamental takeaway going through all these camps, everybody's upset about how offensive linemen are coming out of college and they're not, there's only like SEC Big Ten offenses and those lines feel translatable. That's what teams are saying. Like you got a couple of conferences where there are translatable athletes that we can then bring in. But even then they're playing a lot of the scheme stuff that they're doing is not bringing them into the NFL immediately ready to contribute. Some guys, yes, but by and large, there's a lot of growth and teaching that has to go on now that maybe 15 years ago it wasn't quite as bad. Just the changes on offense in the college game have not groomed offensive linemen for the NFL. But the second part of this, and a GM brought this up, and I thought it was a great point. He was like, right now, if you're an NFL team and you know how to develop offensive linemen, like basically go get whoever you think has the skill set, bring them in and coach them and develop them and turn yourself into a little bit of a factory, a la, I think Philly. People are looking at Jeff Stoutland in Philly and they're saying, these guys develop offensive linemen really well.
Yeah.
And that gives them a fundamental edge over the rest of the league because they can now grow offensive linemen in their system. And these linemen are like going out and they're leaving and they're going to other teams and they're being good players. But it really has given Philadelphia an edge over other teams. So I think you see franchises right now trying to figure out, like, how can we replicate what they're doing in Philly in terms of being able to grow and prepare players. Like, we're pissed off we're not getting offensive linemen where we need them when we draft them. But once we get our hands on them and we like the skill set, how can we then quickly kind of incubate them in our system to make them, steady players? And so I do. I think it's part of its pipeline, but also it's part of the NFL trying to figure out how do we adjust. And I'll tell you what, if Stoutland was not in Philly right now, I can't even imagine how hotly pursued he would be, and the kind of money he might command just because of what he's been able to do in Philly. And just, they've produced a number of starting caliber offensive linemen who have left that system, and they still have a good offensive line in place. It's really a great thing for Philly at this point.
And on that note, I give a lot of credit to Brian Johnson, the Eagles offensive coordinator, because I think it was Lane Johnson and some of their offensive line players were like, yeah, our OC is spending like a pretty good amount of time in offensive line meetings right now. And I think for Brian, I was talking to him about it when I was at Eagles, and he's like, look, when I was offensive coordinator at the college level, I was also the quarterback's coach. So when there was position meetings, I didn't have that luxury. But now that I'm not, and I see just the, I'm trying to remember what he described it as. Like, I think he called it like the intellectual property, like the amount of intellectual property in the offensive line room from a coaching standpoint and from the vets that they've got. He's like, I need to make sure I'm leaning into that and understanding the best way we can maximize that talent. So Philly knows that this is an advantage, and they're also still not taking it for granted. Like, they're really leaning into it.
I've talked to like just some older coaches, and one thing that they lament on is like guys who are playing defensive tackle now might be offensive tackles 20, 30 years ago. Like think about like Calais Campbell, 6'8", 300 pounds. Arik Armstead, 6'7", 300 pounds. Those guys they're tackle bodies. But, when you're starting off in high school, what's the easiest way to disrupt someone? Like, I will disrupt an offense. I will put my guy who's the biggest, most athletic player on the field, put him right over the center, and he'll get like 30 sacks a year in high school. And then, it kind of translates up to defensive to college, where, I mean, think about the athletes that we are seeing come into the NFL on defensive line. It's absurd.
Charles, I'm glad you brought it up, because actually I had another GM when we were talking about the offensive line, just the issues. He pointed out, he's like, what's crazy about this too is look how good the defensive lines are in the NFL now. He's like, there are a ton of good defensive lines in the NFL. And like, it was funny. Like, when we were going through the Jets, I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, this defensive line is freaking amazing. And then when I thought about the division, I'm like, there's really not a bad defensive line in this division. Like, they're all really good. And I think you just hit on it. I think that's absolutely right. That's part of the pipeline problem, is that you have a lot of these great athletes where, as you said, you make them a defensive disruptor. That's the easiest way for them to impact the game. I mean, look, you can be a great left tackle if the rest of the line sucks. I mean, look, I was a center on a offensive line in high school. Okay, like I was like,
Centers
we had
are really smart guys.
Yeah, we had a D1 left tackle, but the rest of us were sorely lacking in that area. But what could he really do? He couldn't block everybody. But yeah, as you said, if you can disrupt an offense as an interior tackler, an edge rusher, or whatever, it obviously makes sense that you're going to get plugged in there on a lower level. What do you? when evaluators talk about looking at the positions on offensive line and they're not seeing like things that are translatable to the NFL level, explain to the audience what they're seeing, like on tape, in college games, that is not necessarily translatable to how an offensive lineman will play on the NFL level.
Well, I think it all starts at quarterback, honestly. Like and this is kind of a pipeline thing too, where you go. I've talked to people about high school football. Like, why don't teams in high school throw the ball more? Well, because most quarterbacks in high school suck, dude. That's why. And then you bring it up to college, and by and large, like, there's guys who are competent who can run a college offense, but then there's a huge tier set between those guys and guys who will actually make it to the NFL, and even another tier break from guys who will actually play. So a lot of college offense is kind of you're catering it to like the expected deficiencies of your quarterback. So we're going to run a lot of option, right? Because we don't want to throw the ball. We're going to a lot of RPO because we need this vision to be clean for our quarterback who can barely throw it 20 yards without getting it picked off. So when you're starting from there, and also like just starting from the fact that for a lot of teams, running the ball is more efficient way to play football for them at college than throwing the ball is. Or it's certainly like an easier, more consistent way to pick up yards. You get these offensive linemen who might have the traits, but they don't have a lot of experience, whether it's running stuff that's not like just straight inside zone, a lot of RPOs. You're not getting for a lot of offense, just like true drop back reps where, you might have to sit back there for a 7-step drop while your quarterback reads it out. And it's interesting because I think you still see a lot of good athletes coming into the position at offensive tackle, but they just don't have a whole lot of experience on like translatable reps that you're going to see in the NFL. So I think when we look at like the success that someone like an Andrew Thomas has had per se with the Giants, when he's coming from an offense where, you're running a lot of the same stuff that you're doing in the NFL. Because Georgia, they have the talent to run maybe a little bit more aggressive things, a little bit more NFL style play. So, I tend to think a lot of it comes back to, well, our quarterback can't throw the ball. Running the ball is more, efficient. So how do we build an offense out of all of this? Because unfortunately, like as much as like I personally would like as a fan of NFL football for this to be like a developmental league for the NFL, it's a whole different entity where you have coaches who are going for their own job security. They've run football for 40 years. They're kind of way entrenched on that. So I think the NFL, unfortunately, is just going to have to pick around that and be able to develop their own guys. But like you said, C-Rob, there's not too many guys that can actually do it at a high level, like Jeff Stoutland. And I think the Packers are another one that kind of come to mind when you look at just developing offensive line talent.
So do you think that the way that they're teaching offensive line at the college level would ever trickle up the way we've seen some of the passing concepts trickle up? Or is that something that's just not going to translate?
No. I think defenses are just too fast. Like, you can't run full RPO. You'll just get bludgeoned at some point during the game. So you got to be able to run like as much as I get annoyed by like some of the guys like, we want a traditional offense. You do have to be able to run that stuff because, like I said, NFL defenses are way too fast. And, a lot of college offense, you can exploit it by, we have one game breaker. You look at like how Kadarius Toney was used back at Florida. One game breaker. If we can just get the ball in his hands, we can make something nice happen. But in the NFL, okay, there might be 5 players on the field on the other side who are just as fast as him. So we got to be able to drop some stuff where we can get the ball down the field. You need to go offensive line for that.
When you look at players and you look at why the NFL game is so difficult, compared, you see players come out of college and you're like, this, high skill level, why is he having such a hard time on the NFL level? It's because defense, by far, other than maybe the quarterback position, I think the speed on the NFL level on defense is what is the most jarring thing for offensive players to deal with. It is so fast and the windows are so small and the players are so skilled. There's a reason why Trey Lance can basically go all this time, not throw passes during his career, and showcase this skill set. And the Niners are like, well, that's translatable. And then he gets to the NFL level and it's like, he looks like he's freaked out the second there's anyone near. He's panicking every time he's trying to pick out a receiver. Or he's waiting for people to be open when you can't throw the ball waiting for people to be open. They are not open when you throw the ball. The point is they will be open when the ball ultimately gets there, and it might only be a yard. So,
dude, there was this scramble a couple days ago where in the Panthers Giants game where Bryce Young is like he's the pocket breaks down, he's scrambling right, and it looks like he's got room to run, and before you know it, there's some giant safety flying down the field. He got 1 yard on the scramble. I was like, "Yep, Bryce, it's a different game. It's a different game than what you were playing last year."
Yeah, and he's coming from where? I mean, Alabama,
Alabama,
the SEC, right? I mean, that's the joke when everyone's like, "Well, Alabama could beat the worst NFL team." Alabama would get its ass kicked by the best NFL team.
Do it once so people stop saying it.
I know.
Please.
We really do. We really do. One time.
How have we not yet?
Let them play like.
Also, would make so much money. Everyone would want to watch, and everyone would want to go.
Just let them play the guys who get cut.
Can we do a Yahoo Sports sponsored game for this?
One quarter in, everyone would be like, "This is terrible. Like, this is a terrible idea.
No,
why are we doing
that liability risk, bro? Trust me. You putting some 19-year-olds on the field with grown-ass men. We don't want to televise that.
Yeah, that's. I'd like to see Trent Williams take a couple shots.
Yeah, some kid who was in prom a few months ago trying to get off a block from Trent Williams.
Oh, I like it though. That's a good idea. I'll let you run that one up the chain, Jori. We'll see if we get anywhere with it.
At the very least, we need pros versus Joes back. Very least.
Are they actually? I saw like a tweet about that. Is that going to happen?
I don't know. I was watching the clip of Michael Irvin going against like some random ass dudes. Yeah, and I was like, we need this show back for sure.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, now my mind is really interested in this. So I feel like the college players have little to lose, a lot to gain, especially because they could get great NIL type sponsorship stuff, which they didn't used to. Do NFL players have anything to gain by doing this?
No, I don't know.
And I would even say, I like walking. I don't know. That's a tough proposition.
Do you have anything to gain by fighting a kid?
No, well, dude. If I'm 18,
people
like.
Do it.
That's very true. That's very true. And, I guess some of these kids are bigger than your average kid, but dude, if I'm 19, 20 years old and I'm going across the middle and I see Derwin James headed my way, I'm starting to rethinking some things, man.
Come on, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Fred Warner.
C-Mac's back is still reeling from going against people his own size.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Okay, last thing before we move on. I remember when I played at Gettysburg my freshman year, we played against Johns Hopkins, who's one of the better Division III teams. And they had a guy at left tackle who was like a borderline UDFA prospect. And he kicks our ass, bro. Like, and he was not even a real NFL prospect. And he was so by and far the best player on the field. It kind of makes you recalibrate like what you're actually watching on Sunday. Like these guys, they're just from a different planet. So I think if we're going to do the college versus NFL thing, it needs to just be like the guys who are going to get cut over the next 2 weeks. They can start a team and then they can go play against Georgia or something. And they would still win like 90-0, dude. Yeah, it wouldn't even be close.
See, now there's something for these NFL guys to gain because maybe it gets them like an XFL type opportunity or they get some good film to show scouts. Come on, guys. I want to watch this.
This pod is completely just
all
over the place. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to throw the ad break. We'll come back with the preseason takeaways. We already did mine, was that offensive lines seem to suck in the NFL right now, and everybody's pissed off about it, at least from the team perspective. But we'll get a couple of takeaways from Jori and C-Mac when we come back. All right, welcome back in. Preseason takeaways. We'll do this to close out. I already gave you guys mine on the offensive lines. Jori, the Bucs the only team not to have QB1 playing at this point in the offseason. It's funny when I hear like sound bites of Kyle Trask talking about this or like Baker Mayfield where they're just like, it's out of my hands. Like, I don't only just show up, just keep showing up. And eventually at some point, the Buccaneers are going to actually name a starting quarterback. I'm sorry, Baker Mayfield's in my Jacoby Brissett box. I don't think at this point, if you're starting
we
Baker
were having
Mayfield,
this debate last week.
Yeah, I don't think starting Baker Mayfield at this point, to me, makes a ton of sense. I'd give Kyle Trask a shot, see if he's the guy. If he's not, I don't think Baker is either. And I think you're squarely in the quarterback market in the draft. Jori, how does this shake out at this point for the Bucs?
Yeah, so let me just paint the picture for our audience. So Bucs come for joint practices with the Jets. Was supposed to be 2 days, was last minute cut to 1. There were some unhappy people from Tampa Bay about this, but I go out there, and C-Mac and I were both out at this practice, and most people are watching the Jets, and I'm like, I really want to understand like what's going on with the Bucs quarterback situation. So kind of go to the other side of the field, and I was like, whatever. So I'm like, I'm just going to watch like whatever Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask do, I'm going to watch that. And then if they go to like third string quarterback, I'll watch Aaron Rodgers and what's going on over there. And it was this weird thing where my friend who works for the Bucs, Bree, she's telling me like, yeah, so every other day, because I was like, Kyle Trask is with the ones. Is that how it's been? She's like, no, every other day they're switching off. They're rotating. And I was like, what? And it just kind of seemed a little bit weird where it's like, how do you even get this rhythm? Baker was having more success against the Jets' first team defense, which a lot of coaches will tell you, including Todd Bowles was saying this, like you can see more sometimes in these joint practices than in preseason games because you're getting more realistic looks that you would get during the season versus these vanilla looks, particularly on certain down and distances that you would get in preseason games. And so I'm just kind of like, well, Baker seems to have more command. He seems to be more productive. Obviously, there's various factors on which first team, second team, offense and defense they're playing alongside and against. And I'm like, okay, and you start asking the Bucs about it. And at first you get the predictable, okay, like we support both guys. We like getting experience with both of them. And then you're like, someone's got to break. And all of a sudden Mike Evans responds to one of my questions and he goes, we want to know who the starter is going to be soon so we can just keep working and they can take control of the offense. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you do. And then even still after this past weekend's preseason game, Todd Bowles is saying there's not a timetable. And I get that you want to see what you have in both, but I think that if you are trying to win games this year, which they claim to be, at some point you've got to just give your offense time to like get ready for the regular season because week one's coming whether or not you've picked your quarterback. And I just think that there are reasons to keep the long-term in mind over the short-term, but I think you should probably be transparent about that. Again, going back to the Colts. The Colts are doing that. They're not starting Anthony Richardson week 1 because he will give them the best chance to win week 1. They're starting him because they need to build that for the future and even throughout this season and into next. The Bucs aren't saying they're doing that. I know that not everyone says everything out loud, but I just think like, what are we doing here? And at some point, how frustrated do all of your players get if no one can be the clear leader in the locker room?
The player frustration is really what I think is key here. It's not whether or not the public knows it, not whether or not your week 1 opponent knows it. It was like when Rodgers was talking about the offensive line. I don't know who he was talking to, but I kind of saw he was like, hey, at some point, I'm going to need to know
said,
like who the 5 guys.
He said there could come a point where I'm going to tell them I need the same 5 in there for a week.
Yeah, you need to understand who the personnel is and how to scheme and adjust for that personnel, knowing the strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, I mean, quarterback, it's fundamental. I don't care about externally. I don't think the Colts should have announced externally that Anthony Richardson was their starting quarterback. Internally, I get it. Let the team know. We're not going to announce it publicly. We'll keep that under, our hat until week 1 rolls around in the regular season. But internally,
at least give the bulk of the first team snaps to somebody.
Sure, to somebody. Yeah.
Sam Howell, they were doing that before they named him quarterback. Everywhere else that's being done. I checked with CJ Stroud. Okay, has he been officially named? Well, he's getting the bulk of the first team, if not like all of them since August 4th, I believe it was. So you got to roll with one guy.
Clock's ticking, bud. Yeah. It's fair. I mean, if I was Mike Evans, I'd be frustrated too. Because he's the one guy throughout all the quarterback turmoil they've had, sans Tom Brady, that's been showing up and producing every year. So if anyone can say, hey, chop, let's get this thing moving, it's him. So, I do wonder, like, what's taking them so long? Because Baker didn't play versus the Jets. When John Wolford got hurt in third quarter, they put Kyle Trask back in the game. So, like, is it Baker? Is it Trask? It seems kind of crazy that even if they haven't announced it externally, that people internally don't know. And it's not like let's be real here. It's not like this is a clash of the Titans here at quarterback. And
I think that's what's taking so long. Neither player's very good.
I guess so. I would just be flipping a coin, done with it, because I think a very real point, going back to, what Aaron Rodgers said about the Jets offensive line is, what he's alluding to is we need to practice together. Like, we need reps, all working together, multiple sustained days, weeks in a row. And this is just not that situation. And, maybe it makes it harder for them. Maybe it doesn't. Who gets like it's Kyle Trask versus Baker Mayfield at the end of the day. Just pick one. Just pick one, please.
This is Baker's 4th team since 2021. Okay.
He was terrible last year too. Holy crap.
4 teams. Give it to Trask.
Except that Thursday night game against Vegas.
Yeah. But then even with Trask, you can say, well, he wasn't good enough to beat out Blaine Gabbert to be a backup. So what is this? I don't know. It's just...
I don't know. Again, I just don't know that you're sitting there staring at Baker and saying, oh, all of a sudden on his 4th team since 2021, the light's going to come on and he's going to click into that player that was drafted, number 1 overall. No, this is...
I mean, he got replaced by Sam Darnold last year.
It's Jameis. It's, it's the quarterbacks that people, continue to give them opportunities because there's something there, but they're not sticking. There's a reason for that. And fine, if Trask gets his shot and he's not good either, you did earn something out of this, a piece of data that you need.
Yeah.
None of these guys are going to work. That's a very important piece of data.
Okay.
It goes back to what I was...
That's a good take on what's gone well this time.
Yeah, I was... Look, the Bucs quarterback stuff is maybe kind of think back to their offseason. And I remember thinking this in real time. Like, why weren't they more aggressive to go get someone? It's not like to me... And
they have weapons.
Right. And the defense should still be pretty good too. Maybe not world beaters like they've been over the past couple of years, but still solid. It's not like the rest of this roster is bad enough where you're going to most likely end up 2-15 or something like that. So I was just a little curious why they didn't really go for it at quarterback.
And they made a call on Stafford. That was kind of interesting. I did find that out when I was going through camps, that they did make a call on Stafford. So it wasn't like they weren't thinking about it. They checked in with the Rams just to be like, what's the deal? You going to do something with this guy? And the Rams are like, we're keeping him. The Stafford level is not the same as the Baker level. You're kind of like, these are very
But even you could have traded up.
Anyone who played for the Rams last year, we're in.
Yeah, maybe something like that. All right, moving on. Let's close this out. C-Mac, the Panthers, the Jets. So when there were joint practices going on, I get a text from a guy in the Panthers, and he's just like, the Jets defense is gonna teams up this year. He's like, this team is, and I'm like, I agree, but you guys really, the offensive line needs to be better than it is at this point. Clearly, some guys still figuring it out on the Panthers offensive line.
That's a bad sign.
Little worried. I'd be a little worried about that right now.
This Panthers thing is kind of multi-layered because it doesn't quite apply to the offensive line conversation we had earlier, because these aren't backups. This is the starting group 2 weeks in a row, and it's okay. I can kind of understand you go out there, your first preseason game against a team like the Jets. They've spent, their backups are recent first-round picks, right? With Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson getting after you. I can understand how you might struggle with that a little bit. Then you get another week of practice in. You play the Giants, and it looks the same for the most part. And I think what else is alarming here is that this is a group that by the end of the season was playing some pretty good football. Icky had developed. Taylor Moton's been a pretty consistently solid guy his whole career. You had guys on the interior that had taken a lot of steps by the end of the year. And, maybe they were outperforming the sum of their parts, but they were still playing some good football. That appears to have all disappeared. I don't know where it went. Icky has taken a pretty big step back from where he was at the end of last year. And it's kind of looking like his, the first quarter of last season that he had, just getting dusted on like single block speed rushes, not even like really complicated stuff. Kayvon Thibodeau got him bad on one last week. Dexter Lawrence was in the backfield. And I get like those guys are two good guys, but the rate at which defensive lines are making plays is pretty alarming, especially when your quarterback, I knew Bryce Young was small and I knew he didn't have like the best physical traits. And honestly, I think based on like what has been put in front of him, he's actually played pretty well this preseason. The size difference is just so notable when he's out there. And, we talked about the scramble play where he's getting caught. I don't know if he's going to be this guy that is escaping a whole bunch of pressure and like making plays happen down the field with his legs. So the protection is going to be pretty paramount for him, and it's just been terrible so far. And it just made me think, like, what do you do with this offense if the offensive line has regressed? Because that's really the whole thing here, right? Because you're looking at the wide receivers. It's DJ Chark, this version of Adam Thielen, and a rookie Jonathan Mingo. It's like, it's okay if the offensive line holds up. And if that doesn't hold up, I don't really know what this offense is supposed to look like this year, because they're not so overloaded with playmakers like with the Jets, where you can kind of close your eyes and imagine a situation where something great happens this year. It's a pretty scary situation, I think, if you're a Panthers fan.
With the Jets, I mean, you have a quarterback who's
played,
experienced, skilled. Like, there's certain things that Aaron Rodgers can do to try to help that situation a little bit. Whereas Bryce, as you said, I mean, the size, you don't want him getting hit really at all. The injury worry, I think, is obviously there. We talked about that going into the draft. I'm worried. Ike Ekwonu, a little nervous. Like, I expected this to be the step forward, right? I thought, okay, played well down the stretch, felt like the unit rounded into form. Naturally, you will have some progress from year 1 to 2 with the group. Not only do you not really have that, but then really the player who's supposed to be the anchor, as you said, it's kind of walking it back a little bit. That's not good. It's concerning. I don't know. It's honestly, it's a little bit of a surprise. I thought that was going to be a big part of their story this year, the progress of the offensive line. And I expected it was going to happen, and it has not. So,
yeah, I mean, it makes you think about the importance of like offensive line coaching. And like you said, the strength of this team was supposed to be, all right, well, we have an offensive line. We added Miles Sanders. We should be able to get by for a year. And then maybe next offseason we can start getting serious about getting some weapons in here, because they were kind of maxed out by the end of the offseason. But man, if the offensive line ain't there, that might be a pretty rough season for the Panthers. Even when you look across the division, the Falcons upgrade their defensive line. The Saints defensive line still has some ass kickers on it. It's scary hours over there, as the youth likes to put it.
Is there any fix in the coming years? I mean, I feel like last year, one of the ways we saw this manifest was the dip in scoring, particularly the first half of the year before offensive lines got settled and defenses were just settled a lot sooner, in addition to just overall. I mean, do you guys see that continuing to go down? And is there anything that reverses the trend?
I don't think, from a practice standpoint, I don't think so. I mean, the CBA is the CBA. When you hear linemen sort of complain about it, they're like, well, there's not enough contact, there's not enough practices and pads, all these different things that really prepare an offensive line for the season. But realistically, I don't know. We can say whatever we want. I don't know that linemen really want more. Yeah, let's beat the hell out of each other even more in the preseason or the offseason. I don't think they want that. So there's going to have to be some other kind of organic fix that is either. I think the fact that teams are recognizing when they look at a team like Philly, what a premium that is, you will see assets get poured into. How do we take our coaching to the next level? Or how do we create a program inside of our franchise to help build, prepare, teach, mold? If Philly can do it, other franchises can do it. Okay. It's not,
I mean, Stoutland's not old, but he's 61 and he's been coaching for a long time. And so I wonder if there comes a time where he just starts coaching like he's no longer with one team and starts sort of giving clinics for coaching offensive line across the league.
I think it works because he's in that program. He knows the offense. He knows what's expected. He knows the strengths or weaknesses of the quarterback. I do think it's germane to the team. I don't think you just all of a sudden have more offensive line camps in the offseason. The next thing you know, these linemen are all getting better. There's certain fundamentals you can teach, but the reason why it works in Philly is because they know how to curve it to what they need in their own organization. And not only that, personnel wise, they're going and drafting players that they think will be able to fit that type of coaching style or the skill set that they really want. The ecosystem is it's much more detailed and important than maybe other people have figured out. I just think teams will start to look for, how can we go find our version of this guy? Let's get the GM in the room. Let's get the head coach in the room, and let's figure out who's out there and available. And then once we get them in here, lock them down. Literally, a GM said to me, it's what Philly is doing. And Jeff Stoutland, he's worth his weight in gold. Like, it is what they are doing is so important right now that if you can become an offensive line factory like that, you're going to really have an advantage over NFL teams in a way that's not really solvable quickly. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Real quick, before we get out of here, I did want to ask you both something. We have seen now, we're seeing these joint practices get cut. And obviously the Jets canceled their second day of joint practices with the Bucs. I was in the Bucs team hotel. They were really pissed off. I will bet you that you won't see teams. I think we're getting to the point where we won't see teams do more than one joint, like they won't have more than one series of joint practices. They'll have we have joint practices with this franchise. That's it. And I'll bet you we won't see multiple days. I know it's a hell of a lot of travel to do more than one day, but I don't know if it's the fights or what exactly is causing this, but you are definitely, I think, seeing teams start to look at the joint practices and go, okay, there's clearly an upside to this, but is there too much? Like, do we just need to do this for a day and then get out? Because I don't know if it's the fight factor or what it is, but it feels like you're starting to see some diminishing returns, or maybe you just have, since you're going to pare it down to just doing it with one team, fine. We have 2 days with one team and then that's it. But this idea of having multiple joint practices each 2 days, I think it's kind of almost run its course at this point.
Yeah, I think we saw Jets Bucs. There were 5 fights that day.
I counted 6.
You were there 6. Okay, you were counting more closely than I just saw them continue to break out, and they were happening on multiple fields, so it was hard to even keep track of who was fighting at what point and when. But I mean, that one resulted in a coach needing to be taken to the hospital, so it's not great. And then on the other hand, you have teams who are fighting among their team or within their team and being like, well, we don't have joint practices and not a lot of our guys are playing in the preseason, so it's hard to get the energy out somehow. And I'm like, which one do you want? Like, what do you want to go on here? But I do think that if the fights continue like that, between that and the travel, that's not going to outweigh getting your first team guys a couple of looks against defenses. But I think they're fun. Like, I'm not saying they
great.
Shouldn't happen, but
yeah.
but I think that seems to be where this is going.
It's a little disappointing just because I feel like, when you look at especially what happened with Tampa Bay and the Jets on Wednesday, that was pretty crazy.
Real quick, Mike Evans said afterwards, he goes, and he's in year 10, he goes, I've never seen so many fights in a joint practice. I've been in a lot of joint practices, and someone's like, why do you think that is? He was like, I don't know, I guess since we only had one day, we had to get all our fights out today. And I'm like, what? And then I was also laughing because I was wondering if were the Jets players pissed that they're like, we came all the way here for 2. Not only did you cut it to 1, but it was the first day, so it's not like we could travel a day later. So, like, we're going to punch you for it.
I mean, maybe. But, I do think there's some truth to what Robert Saleh said last week when it's like, hey, this is paraphrasing here, but like this is just a part of football practice. Like the dudes are gonna fight. And hopefully you get to a point where it doesn't bog down a practice. Like what the problem with the Jets and Giants and the Jets and the Bucks fighting last week is you start to get to a point where you can't get anything done because everyone's fighting the whole time. And then you're just like, well, what the hell did we come out here for 2 hours for? Yeah. Right. It ruins but it's football. It's football, bro.
You're right. And Salah's right. But let's be completely honest. We know when we go to joint practices, we are going to see fights. We know it. I don't know going to any other practice that I'm definitely seeing a fight that day. I know every single joint practice I've ever been to, there has been a fight. And when I say a fight, I don't mean like some pushing. Like it's a fight. Like it might not be Aaron Donald beating the hell out of somebody with their helmet against, the Bengals. Like it doesn't get that bad, but there's going to be a pretty nasty fight at some point in joint practices. I actually kind of look forward to it, that I'm going to go today and see fights. But at what point, like if a player gets hurt, like, what if guy tears an ACL? Like what if, Aaron Donald, he literally, who was Lyle Collins? Like he was beating the hell out of somebody with his own helmet. Like Aaron Donald ripped the dude's helmet off and was hitting him with it. He did the Myles Garrett and didn't get the Myles Garrett punishment.
That one was bad, but whatever. You scuffle, you fight. We're asking these guys to run into each other for an hour every Sunday.
There's always a guy who punches a guy who's wearing a helmet. Always. There's always like a guy.
It doesn't hurt as bad as you think it does.
Yeah,
it doesn't hurt.
It's just not smart. Like it's not smart to take a tool.
You're just a rage monster. This guy, we've been hitting each other all day, but one time when he pushed me, it was too far. So now I gotta take my fist and try to put it through his face mask. And in the heat of the moment, it really
when my teammate does it, I gotta do it. So.
Correct. And sometimes I have to put my fist through my teammate's face mask, and it's okay because it's football.
Thank God there's not the Deion Sanders mentality. If one person's fighting, you're all fighting. Like that's a sage piece of coaching by Deion Sanders in that Colorado program. All right, well, we'll wrap that up here. We are going to be back on Wednesday. It will be C-Mac and Frank Schwab. So be sure to tune in for that.
Guaranteed fire.
I won't hold Frank back, and he won't hold me back. I'm just gonna let him say whatever the hell he wants.
Try to convince him that Jacoby Brissett is the answer. Okay, let's start.
I will.
Yeah, let's relitigate this with a new cast.
I will. That's what the show's all about.
All right. Well, you can get me on Twitter at Charles Robinson. You can get Jori at Jori Epstein. C-Mac is at 4Verts, and Stone Rochelle, our Ace podcast producer, SJ Rochelle. Please help us keep Therese Paylor's legacy alive. Check out BringTea.com/Therese for the all juice tea or hoodie. Remember that purchases on that site go to support the Therese Paylor Scholarship at Howard University. You can also support that directly, as well as the scholarship in his name at Missouri, if you check out our podcast description. It's fantasy season. Check out the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show with our guy Matt Harmon to get ready for draft seasons. Pressing on us. Only a couple weeks left. And as always, please leave a 5-star review. Tell a friend. Help us grow the family. We will. Well, I won't, but C-Mac will see you on Wednesday. So tune in for C-Mac and Frank on Wednesday. Peace.